Hi, I'm Katie Halcrow with Power Up Prep, and I'm super excited today to take you through some tips and strategies to help you power up your ACT. If this is your first time with us, first, welcome. Second, check out the link below. There, you're going to find the ACT questions and the note sheets that you can do along with these videos. All right, so let's get those materials together, and we're going to be ready to power up. Okay, so what I want to dig into now are some words that you need to know for the ACT test. I know I've talked about how vocabulary questions don't matter, but these are different because these are predictable. These are the words that come up on the ACT because people mess them up all the time. People use different words in their place. So let's talk about some of these pairs. First pair is than with an A versus then with an E. Than with an A is a comparison, like I like apples more than bananas. So that then is used for a comparison, so we use the A. Whereas first I'm going to the movies, then I'm going to meet my friend, that then is with an E. I remember these because than with an A is used for comparisons, which has an A in it, and then with an E is used for time, and time has an E in it. So that's just how I remember them. The ACT tests these very frequently. I see them a lot. So you want to make sure you know the difference between those two. Okay, another one that has come up on the ACT is lay versus lie. So the difference between lay and lie is subtle but important. So if you have an object that you're putting down, that you lay that object down. But if you are putting yourself down or another thing is putting itself down, then you are lying down. So I lie down to sleep, but I lay my daughter down to sleep. You see the difference? So lay is if you've got an object, like you're doing something to something, then you lay it down. And if something is doing it to itself, so I'm doing it to myself, my son is doing it to himself, etc. Or a tree just like fell in the forest, the tree is lying on the floor. The tree is lying on the floor of the forest because the tree is just there. Okay, so that's lay versus lie. Then the next one is compliment versus compliment. So compliment with an I is like complimenting someone, like, oh, you look so beautiful today. That's a compliment. Whereas compliment with an E is making something whole or complete. So if the two people compliment each other, they're not like, oh, you're so beautiful. It's not like each one is saying how beautiful the other one is. The two people compliment each other if they make a whole. Like sometimes married couples are said to compliment one another, like they're each other's half. Okay, the next one I want to talk about is affix with an A versus effix with an E. This is another subtle difference one because people think that you use them for the same thing, but affix with an A is a verb, whereas effix with an E is a noun. So global warming affects our environment, right? So in that case, global warming affects our environment. The affects is used as a verb. But if I would say the effect of global warming is dire for our environment, that in that case, I'm using effect as a noun. So the effect of global warming is dire for the environment versus global warming affects the environment. Or you could say what he says affects how I feel. So that's a verb form, whereas effect with an E is the noun form. Okay, so next one I want to talk about is peak versus peak versus peak. Okay, so first peak, P-E-E-K, like peekaboo. Do this with babies, right? And then the next one is peak, like a mountain peak, P-E-A-K. And then the third one is peak, like pique your interest. So my interest is piqued in that. So like my interest is raised or sharpened. So piqued my interest. So then we have allusion versus illusion versus illusion. So allusion with an A is when you reference something. So he alludes to that in his book. So he alludes to the poem in his book. So he's making reference to the poem in his book. The second allusion with an E is to get away from capture. So like the suspect eludes the police. So eludes the police. The suspect eludes the police, so he gets away from capture. Whereas illusion is a perception. So we would say that magicians are masters of illusion. So they're masters of perception. They can trick us from the way we perceive things. Okay, next one is accept versus accept. So accept, like we accept him into our group, or she accepts the present. So like take in, right? Or like receive. So that's a form of accept. And then the other one is accept, like everything but. So except for toast, we have everything else we need for breakfast. So the accept is with the exception of. Okay, let's talk about further versus farther. Farther with the A refers to physical distance. So since I live in Minnesota, Hawaii is farther away from me than Iowa. So farther is referring to the physical distance, whereas further is referring to something that's a progression, but not physical distance. So I am further along in my homework than I expected to be. So we wouldn't say I'm farther along in my homework because it's not a physical distance. Homework isn't a physical distance, but it's still something we're doing and it's still showing a progression. So I'm going to use the word further. Okay, so then I want to talk about many and much and fewer and less. So for many, and the difference between them is if they're countable versus not countable. So many we use for countable things. There are many toys in our house. I wouldn't want to count the number of toys in our house, but I could count them if I wanted to. So I could say there are many toys in our house. I wouldn't say that there are much toys in our house, but I would say there is too much sugar in these muffins. So I can't count the sugar in the muffins, but I can say that there's too much sugar in the muffins. Same thing with fewer and less. So I could say, I wish there were fewer toys in my house. I wouldn't say I wish there were less toys in my house. And I could say, I wish these muffins had less sugar in them, but I wouldn't say I wish these muffins had fewer sugar in them. So we use many and fewer if it's countable, and we use much and less if it's not countable. Okay, got it? Let's talk about could've versus could've. So could've, and they sound the same to our ear, right? Like could've, which is why we mess them up and which is why the test tries to trick you. Could've, C-O-U-L-D apostrophe V-E, actually means could have. We pronounce it could've because it's a contraction, could have. Could've, so C-O-U-L-D and then O-F as the next word, is actually not a phrase that you can use ever. It's not grammatically correct. It's what we hear with our ear, so that's why the test tries to trick us and have us choose could've, but it's actually not true. Could've is not a grammatically correct response. You have to use the contraction could have, which is could've, C-O-U-L-D apostrophe V-E. Okay, so the next one I want to talk about is sight versus sight versus sight. So sight, S-I-G-H-T, refers to vision, right? Like my sight is good. Oh, what a sight for sore eyes, like something like that, something that you see. Whereas sight, S-I-T-E, is referring to a place. So a burial site, or like the site of constructions, like a construction site. So a site is referring to a specific place, S-I-T-E. And then sight with a C is referring, or it means referencing. So like if I were to write a paper, I would need to cite my sources. So that form of cite is C-I-T-E. So we have sight, S-I-G-H-T, which is for vision. We have sight, S-I-T-E, which is for a specific place. And then we have sight, C-I-T-E, which is for referencing. Okay, so those are our words to know. I know that there's a few of them, but once you have them down, it's gonna feel so much better while you're taking the test. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope that this was helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to leave them below. We'd love to hear from you. Also, if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button so that you won't miss out on any of our curriculum or other tips and tricks that can help you power up your ACT.